Welcome to Two Gray Goatees and a Whistle. I'm your host, Coach Udy. I am joined today by former Eastern Oregon University grad player, Genesee High School alum, Coach Justin Udy, the assistant quarterback coach at Boise State University. How you doing, Justin?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on today.
Hey, so thanks for joining me. This is really nice to get to catch up with you and stuff like that. And being a part of the show, I like to bring players, coaches on here to kind of give their take, kind of peel behind the curtain of what it's like to coach and stuff that goes on. And so I really appreciate you taking your time to be on the show.
Yeah, of course. I think this kind of stuff's awesome, and I think hopefully it's educational and helpful for people. I know there's a lot of things that are really confusing, especially about college football right now, because it's ever changing, and so it's confusing for coaches. I can't even imagine for people who are trying to follow it, or people that
Right.
have kids that are going through the recruiting process, all the different avenues of it right now. I can imagine it's pretty wild, even from the outside looking in. So.
Yeah. And we are going to get to that later on. And so, yeah, we'll get into talk about the business side. But first, I kind of want to talk about your journey, kind of how you got into sports growing up. What were some of the first sports that you're drawn or kind of were attracted to, I guess?
Yeah, probably my first sports memories. We were just talking about Hagerman. I used to live in Hagerman, Idaho, and I was the water boy, ball boy for my dad's high school football team. And so, like a lot of people, I think at a young age, you have those moments where you're impacted by, something like that. And for me, it was my dad being a coach and wanting to be around the high school football players and the guys. So I took to football at an early age. My dad played in college and had a passion for it, and I think that's what led to him coaching at the high school level. From there, it was just my parents being super supportive, and all four of us siblings. So I'm one of four. We were all a year apart, so we were all really close in age, and so I think one of the avenues for my parents was to get us involved in activities. And so for me, it was, whatever the seasonal sport was, we were doing it. And so it was everything, whether it was soccer or baseball time on the summertime, football and basketball and, track and field. There's a lot of different sports and avenues that you could go, but my parents were really, really great about trying to get us involved in all of it. So I think for me, it was the competition side of it. And, obviously I took to football the most, like I mentioned before, but certainly enjoyed all the sports. And growing up in a small town like I did, you kind of needed everybody to play everything. And that was the exciting part about it. That's what really brought the community together. So my earliest sports memories were being that ball boy or that water boy on that football team when I was just learning how to walk, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Being that you did use sports, and obviously you worked yourself way up to high school and college, did you sports teach you anything that shows up today as you're coaching in college? Is there things that even people at a young age or coaches that are coaching or people that still translate at the college level?
Well, for sure. I think probably one of the things that's most important that I even notice right now is like being able to understand the difference between success and failure, but also the growth that comes from both of those. I would just say I can still remember playing youth basketball and literally being that guy that every time we would lose, being upset to the point where it brings you to tears. And I think that there's some good in that you're learning that like it matters to you and that you care and that you have that competitive spirit, but also that there's that line too where it's like, nobody wants to have the crybaby on their team. And so I think from an early age, I had a lot of friends that I went to school with that we had the opportunity to play together from when we were in youth sports. So, second, third grade, all the way up through our senior year of high school. And we just developed a strong bond and relationship too that I think that youth sports, it started with youth sports where it was just the accountability part of it. The parents being gracious enough to be consistent with kids turning out for sports and how important that was to our growth and our development and our relationships. And I think that's what led to us having success in our high school years. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from youth sports, even away from the physical side of it. I do think the developmental piece, the hand-eye coordination, all of those things that come with all the different kinds of sports that you can play that kind of helps round you out as an athlete are really, really important to your development. If playing past high school is something that you want. And I think that the coaching at that level is really important too, and having a good understanding of fundamentals and how those have changed through the years, depending on what sport it is. But I had really, really good youth coaches that did a great job of starting from the beginning and took the time to really invest in us on the fundamental parts of each sport that we were playing. And then I was also really lucky because I had parents that didn't overstep their boundaries either. My parents were coaches, but they did a great job, I think, of just supporting the people that were actually the coach of that youth team. I think that's another important piece. I think we see it a lot now where parents overstep their boundaries, and that's unfortunate because what they don't realize is as a youngster, you're just standing there watching that, taking it all in, right? And I think the most important things is that the person who's sacrificing their time, sometimes they don't even have a kid on the team. That's a big commitment, and there's a lot of responsibility that goes into that. And being from a town like I was from, in the community of Genesee, gosh, you just couldn't ask for a better situation when it came to the support and the people, that we were surrounded by there.
And I think that's true. And talking about community support and stuff like that, it's huge on the growth that you get within sports, and these kids see that. And, I've been a huge advocate, even if you don't have a kids in the sport, if you got sports in your community, man, if you have nothing going on Friday night or, a weekday or whenever, a sporting event, go down and watch them. And they notice that. They notice when they see somebody there watching their games, and it really uplifts them. And the other side of that with the parents and stuff like that, yeah, it's obviously it's becoming a little bit more of an issue. But I think talking to some other people and stuff like about how parenting and youth sports and sports in general, just I think parents have good intentions. I think sometimes they don't realize that they kind of get in the way, or they might be doing something detrimental. So they go to the game, I think, with good intentions and like, hey, I'm going to support my kid. And then something happens, triggers something in them, and they kind of lose some self control. And then they become that parent where they're, you know, kind of making a fool out of themselves. So,
For
that's
sure.
stuff that happens. But going back to what you were saying about community support, that is huge in the development of your players. And you see it time and time again when you have community support like that, not just from parents and from the coaches, but from the community. I think you'll find greater success with those kids moving on.
Oh, there's no
Okay,
question.
let's talk about so let's talk about your time in college. Okay, let's talk about a little bit about how you got recruited and how you ended up going up to Eastern, and kind of your experience walking through college and stuff like that. And then we'll go a little bit later on about how that's changed maybe. But what was your experience like getting ready to come out of high school and you have an opportunity to move on and play more football?
Yeah. So thinking back on it, um, I mean, high school went so fast, and I was an 8-man football player. So I grew up in northern Idaho, and played at Genesee High School, and was really really lucky enough. We were really successful, really my last 3 years of high school there. So we were able to make the state championship all 3 years of my last years, and we ended up winning one of them when I was a junior. So had a lot of success, and I think that carried some momentum into my college recruitment. It was really hard to get recruited from an 8-man school, and back in that time, individual camps hadn't really become a major thing yet, especially in small communities. These individual camps were really expensive, the ones that were available. So they weren't typically something that you would go to from a recruiting standpoint like you have now. So it was really team camp. And that was a turning point for me in my recruiting. So we went to team camp at Eastern Oregon when I was a sophomore. They used to host an 8-man camp there on campus. Now they host it off campus. And then the following years, we went to a school up in Spokane, Washington, up to Whitworth. So, a lot of my recruitment came from the schools that I attended the camps at. Again, I was a undersized kind of spread option quarterback. So it made sense to me at the time in my recruitment to go to a school that ran an offense where I could utilize those skills. I really wanted to be an offensive player. I think some schools, because of my size, saw me as more of like a defensive player. And so then in my recruitment to Eastern Oregon, a great man in Etienne, who's a tremendous college coach and has had a phenomenal career. and just took a job actually at Washington State, which I'm really excited for him. He recruited me to Eastern Oregon and went down on a visit. And those official visits looked a lot different back then, and they certainly looked different at a spot like Eastern Oregon. Had a couple of guys that I knew on the team already. I really enjoyed the coaches that I met on the trip, and it was a quick turnaround. It was kind of one of those deals where there was a lot of us on the trip, and it was kind of, hey, we're not going to wait around for an answer for a long time. And so I just decided that based off of the offense that we were running triple option at the time, that was a place that I could compete to go and have a chance to play quarterback. So I did. I committed pretty shortly after that, and I was able, at that time, not a lot of players were starting school early. I think Kyle Whitty was maybe the only guy in my class that actually attended that spring in our freshman class. So the rest of us, it was a big freshman class. I can't remember exactly the number, but at that time, those freshman classes were big. And so a lot of us went, and I remember being, I think dead last on the quarterback depth chart when I got to school there. It was a challenge, and shoot, by the first game after fall camp, had worked my way up into kind of the third string quarterback spot. And so I was able to travel as a freshman, and that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me because I became really addicted to it like I did when I was in high school. I got to redshirt that year. The rules were different then. So if you played at all, then you forfeited your year. So for me, just having a clipboard and being at those games, even the away games, charting the plays, watching the older guys, traveling, all of those things kind of helped set the stage for me. And probably for me more as a coach than a player, but it definitely helped me as a player understand what it was going to take. We struggled. I think we went maybe 1-10 my redshirt freshman year. We weren't a very good football team at that time. And then coming back around after my redshirt year, that's when Coach Camp took over as the head football coach. That was one of the best things that ever happened to me, but at the time probably felt like one of the worst things because that meant we were going to switch offenses, potential position change, a leadership change brings a lot of challenges. And so my college career, though, I was thankful that it happened early, and then I had a lot of consistency from then on. One of my greatest mentors ended up being my position coach in Zach Tinker, who's having a phenomenal coaching career himself.
Yes, he is.
And so he really set the stage for me and made me realize that I wanted to continue this coaching journey pretty early in my college career. And so I did. I stayed with quarterback kind of through those early years, but then had the opportunity and had been contacted to transfer at that point because there was some opportunities to go and play quarterback at other places. I was very, very fortunate enough to play at Eastern Oregon during some great years with some phenomenal players. And one of those players is the Hall of Famer Chris Ware, who's one of my best friends and closest friends. Stood by me during my wedding, and one of those types of people, just has been a brother to me. But he was also played the same position as me and was an All-American and one of the most decorated players in school history. So for me, it was really probably this day and age is everyone's telling you to transfer. For me, I really wanted to stay at Eastern Oregon. I wanted to be with my friends that I had made, and I'm a loyal person, and I appreciated the opportunity that Eastern Oregon gave me, so I wanted to try to find a way to stay, but I wanted to play. And so I was really lucky that the coaches worked with me, and I got the opportunity to play slot receiver as well. So I would kind of supplement in at quarterback when we needed that to be the case game to game, whether Chris was injured or couldn't play. We were up a lot, down a lot, whatever the situation was. One of the other quarterbacks wasn't available, but then I got the opportunity to compete at another position, and that's all that mattered to me was at that point the opportunity to play and contribute. So I did. I played slot receiver, in and out kind of through those next several years, and had some good seasons and had some below average seasons from a production standpoint. But probably for me, like I said, there was a lot of life lessons through those years that kind of helped set the stage for, my coaching career, who I am and how I approach, coaching today. I know a lot of that was affected from my time in LeGrand. And, that's why LeGrand holds, is near and dear to my heart. And I've met some of my closest friends while I played there, and that's just what makes those kind of places special. And I think sometimes nowadays it's harder to have that because of the way that the landscape and the space is at some of the bigger schools that I've been at. But I wouldn't trade my college years for anything. And like I said, when I left there as a player, when I got done playing, I should say, we were one of the winningest 4-year stretches in school history. And so that made me really
Yep.
proud that we were able to kind of be a part of helping turn that thing around. And it was early in Coach Camp's career, so I know he was excited, and I was, you had a lot of awesome coaches that have gone through there that have been super supportive of me in my career, and so it just was an awesome place to play and go to school, and met a ton of great people. And like I said, yeah, I don't when I look back on my time there, it's a lot of smiles. I know that. I really loved my time in LeGrand.
Yeah, and you brought up some great coaches, and I remember being there. I remember going to school there, and I remember talking to camp and being able to help out, or at least get to observe and kind of be help out a little bit during spring ball one year, and that was a great experience. And I remember you being around, and I remember when you were playing. Coach Tinker was Zach. He's amazing. He's off at Oregon right now doing his thing. Coach Camp just stepped down at Eastern, so he's a you know he left a lasting impact on that university. And then people like you and all the players you brought up, where Chris, I remember watching him and just being in awe just how amazing it was. We're no slouch, by the way, just to give yourself a little credit. You did a pretty amazing job there, along with some of the other players. And maybe brought up Whitty, and I remember when he was playing high school, and I know some of the stuff he did. So a lot of great players went through that university, and not just players, but men. A high character, and I can say that, being around, especially that year that I was there, that spring, I got to help out. Samson when he was playing, Matt Ortman, some of those guys I was around and stuff like that. They were fantastic gentlemen, and it was great being around them. So I can vouch for what you're saying about Eastern and how amazing it is, and how the place. I really appreciate your time there and stuff like that, and how you're moving on and finding your own success. And I think that's amazing. Let's talk about let's kind of move a little bit about how you approached playing in college. You and it seems like, and we'll talk a little bit about the landscape of what's going on with creating now NIL and all this stuff. But let's talk about your approach when you were in school. You went somewhere, they had a change, but you remained loyal to that school. And I think sometimes from the outside looking in, we look at this, especially with NIL, it seems that loyalty is kind of not quite there. And I know NIA is a little bit different, because I talked to Coach Christian Nicole, softball coach, here a couple weeks ago, and she kind of talked about a little bit how the NIA doesn't really have the access to the portal like the NCAA does, like you guys do. So going on that, your approach, you stuck with it. Do you think you sticking with that, and maybe not necessarily playing right away? It seems like you learned a lot on the sideline. You kept yourself engaged in what was going on the sideline. And is that really what it was that helped? Did that make you decide you wanted to coach, or was the coaching kind of something you even thought about before you got into the college?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I definitely considered coaching before I got to college because, again, my dad was one of my high school coaches. Was always kind of around our home and important to me. Even my mom was a coach. She coached my sister's youth basketball and helped with some other sports. So I think coaching was something I knew I was always kind of interested in. Both my parents were educators. They were teachers. So, I think I didn't know that I wanted to be a teacher, but maybe from the angle of sports, you knew that was a way that you could reach people and impact people. And then I just think that during my time at Eastern, probably one thing that I left out is I had my fair share of injuries, and that's what probably brought on the inconsistencies of my career. But it's helped me as a coach because I understand how injuries play a factor, especially into the game of football. But I had multiple surgeries through my playing career that kind of, I wouldn't say derailed it. It set back some of the progress that I would make. It feel like you'd take 2 steps forward and 1 step back every time something like that would happen. But what it taught me was that I had great support, and just seeing the way that, Tim Camp, Zach Tinker, some of the other coaches that we had on staff at the time supported me through that. It made me quickly realize that that's somebody that I wanted to be. I wanted to be somebody that somebody who was 18 to 23 years old and was going through a pretty crucial point in their life. I wanted to be a support system and, just like I had. And so, as I went through my time there, I think I realized that I didn't play my freshman year. I redshirted, like I mentioned. I think seeing it from that angle was really important, and I think getting an appreciation for valuing what we had in front of us. I was lucky enough that following season to get an opportunity to play. So I played quite a bit my redshirt freshman year. That kind of kept me in it. I think if this day and age, if guys can play early in their career, they have a rule now where you can play quite a few games and still redshirt. So that's the goal, right? Like you try to get as many guys involved in game plans and games where you think that they can fit in, but then still preserve a season of eligibility. I wish I would have been able to be a part of that. I think that that's a great addition that they've made in the college game since my time. But it is tricky and it's not easy. And back in those days, it was really hard to keep people engaged and interested because everybody thinks that they're better than the person in front of them, right? Our perceptions of ourselves are inflated. And, then for me, like that was a period of time when Western Washington dropped their football program and Eastern Oregon absorbed a lot of players from that football program that were a little bit older. So it was almost like an transfer portal experience before the transfer portal was even available. And, guys like Rick Copsey and Michael Corral transferred in at the same position I was playing. I still talk to Michael Corral to this day. He was such a great mentor. I know Rick Copsey's done his fair share of high school coaching and was a phenomenal player for us. And so, as a sophomore and somebody who had just played a lot the year before, that was probably the hardest year for me. But I also was realistic and I saw that these two guys who were seniors who had played at a high level, were really, really good players, phenomenal players for us, were guys that I learned a lot from that season. And so for me, I think it's all about mindset. I was able to contribute in a lot of different ways as I went through my career. And some were seasons like that when it was like, hey, man, what's your chance to get on the field? And for me, it became on special teams. So then it was like, okay, what do I got to do to be a core four special teams guy? And then that's led to me having a passion for special teams in my coaching career. And I've been a special teams coordinator several places that I've been. And that came from my time from that sophomore year when I got to start on a lot of special teams and then contribute where I could on offense. And, I think not everybody's going to be wired that way. I think, again, I was just lucky enough where I had a support system who, was really willing to tell you the truth and help you through the hard times, but get you to see it from a holistic perspective. And again, I think it's helped make me the coach that I am today, but I certainly appreciated all those relationships with a lot of those guys. Even the 1 year playing guys that I got to play with, those guys made a big impact on me. Now, whether they know that or not, I guess I'm telling them right now here on your podcast, but I probably should tell them at some point because they were such great leaders at a pretty critical time for me as a player. And that led to me having a junior year that started off really, really good. And then I hurt my knee and missed several games in the middle of the year and then came back and I think probably had the maturity level at that point to be able to handle whatever was going to be thrown at me senior year. And I was lucky enough to stay healthy and kind of finish it out on a high note. And we had a really, really good season. I think we went 8-3 and was hoping we were going to make the playoffs and didn't. And that was probably one of the biggest blows, was just that we never got to take it to the postseason. And it was a really tough conference, during my time there. Carroll College was winning the national championship every other year. And, some of the other Montana schools were really, really tough. And so it was just, I'm really, really proud of my playing career. And a lot of that probably just stems from a lot of the great people that I was around. It gives me a big sense of pride.
Yeah. Yeah, I can tell you the Frontier Conference is still one of the top conferences in the nation, and I that. Seems like every year
Yeah.
somebody from our conference, from that conference, is competing either the national championship or close. So let's talk about a little bit now. You just talk about making that jump to coaching. What is something players misunderstand about that jump when they go from player to coach? When you got into coaching, you started coaching, what are some things that you didn't quite understand? I mean, your father, obviously, you were around some coaching, so watching your dad and stuff when you were younger. But getting into yourself jumping from player to coach, what were some of the things that maybe players don't know, or just the public doesn't know necessarily when they make that transition?
Yeah, I think for me, because of the place I was coaching and was coaching at my alma mater, and the setup there at the time was you were kind of a position coach right away. I think probably the hardest thing is like you think you probably know more than you actually know. And so you have to learn a lot of tough lessons. You don't actually know that much. Again, I was lucky to have some great coaches. Levy Sue, was great for me. He was the defensive coordinator that first year when I was helping coach, and he had coached on staff while I was playing. And he was great for me because he gave me kind of that tough love and helped me, uh, you know, realize on certain days that I didn't have it all figured out, which I needed. I think uh, other things that people don't really realize is just the time commitment, the amount of sacrifice that it takes. I turned down a lot of opportunities to go start careers where you have a salary and you have health insurance and when you're trying to start a family with somebody or a relationship with somebody and you tell them you're making $500 a month, that's not super appealing, right? So, living in the office and living off microwave food but at the time thought it was the best thing ever and still love looking back on it. I think when you coach at places like that, I mean, I took a stipend to be kind of the equipment guy and help paint the practice fields and the game fields and help do the laundry the one year. And I took a year where I was like our film guy and I did the film. And so I got a lot of different experiences coaching at a place like Eastern, but like that I still use today in my coaching career. But I just don't think people really. I would always get asked the question. Probably the question you get asked the most is, "Well, what else do you do?" And the answer is no. This is what I do for a living, and people just don't realize the commitment, the year-round commitment that people put in, and whether it's the recruiting part of it or during the seasons, the spring football season, the summer football season, or the fall football season. So the other thing that was hard is I was the same age or a year older than some of the players I was coaching, and that wasn't easy either. And so you have to learn to balance that and the personalities, the different personalities that are in a locker room and the different dynamics that are in a locker room. All those are challenges that you don't really think that much about when you're in it as a player. But then as you transition to a coach, you have to grow up in a hurry, especially if you want to be good at it. You want to be taken serious. You have to find a way to learn to balance that. And so that was a challenge for me early on in my coaching career, but it helped really set the stage for some of the moves that I made and some of the relationships that I was able to develop early in my coaching career with some of those guys that I'm really good friends with today.
Okay. Yeah, and it's and it doesn't change. It doesn't matter what level it is, whether you're at high school, whatever. There's the time commitment is insane, and away from your family, and I'm sure your wife have found out what it means to be a coach's widow. I mean, my wife, I was already doing coaching, and it took her a few years to figure out why I loved coaching, and I think unless your spouse is has coached before, I think sometimes it can't that struggle can be there for a little bit, and they have that adjustment happens and stuff like that. But
Right.
once the couples figure it out and they can communicate and they understand what the job entails, and that support from your spouse is huge. Having that support system is something that's important in coaching. Is that support from your family, from your spouse in particular, because it's a lot of time away from home, and it is. And I can't imagine in high school, in college levels, in even the pro level and stuff like that. That's a whole other level of time committed, I'm sure. So,
Yeah. No,
definitely something to appreciate.
I probably better give a shout out to my wife. Actually, she's also an
Yeah.
Eastern Oregon alum. But yeah, my wife Shannon and I actually met in LeGrand. Kind of as I was finishing up my time in LeGrand, she was actually graduating, and so yeah, she went to Eastern Oregon also. So she's a diehard Mountie, and yeah. We have a lot of great memories. She has a lot of great memories from LeGrand too. So yeah, I gotta make sure to mention her. She's been one of the keyest pieces to this whole thing. You wouldn't be able to do what I've done without her support.
So talking about places you've been, because you talked about because you've been around. We can talk about you've been around the map a little bit. So South Dakota of the Mines. Am I correct? You were there. You went there with Tinker.
Yep,
Is that right?
I did. So I
Okay.
went to
So you were
work
there.
for yep.
So you had that. I mean, obviously you were at Easton for a little bit, went over there with him, and then you kind of bounced around some other places. I want to say, was Texas Tech there for a little bit? And then I know you were at Montana State here up until last year, right? Or this year? What are the
Yeah,
places kind of you bounced around a little bit?
so my coaching career took me, I did 3 years at Eastern Oregon. So I finished there. I want to say my last season was in 14. Some great years coaching there. Had some awesome players, Zach Bartlow, Jace Billingsley seasons. Like those guys were awesome. In fact, the first kid I ever recruited as a college coach was Zach Bartlow. So I always like hang my hat on that because I'm like, he was a very, very successful quarterback at Eastern Oregon. And then I was lucky enough, I thought I'd made it as a position coach because I was coaching Jace Billingsley as a freshman. And I was like, this coaching thing's easy. Like they're all going to be NFL
Yeah.
players, right? So
Exactly.
yeah, I always name drop those two guys with the Eastern folks because they know, or anybody that was in the Frontier Conference at the time knows those two
Yeah.
guys.
Yep.
So I did 3 seasons, then I went out and I was the receiver coach recruiting coordinator at South Dakota School of Mines, which is in Rapid City, South Dakota. And I did 1 season as the receiver coach and recruiting coordinator. And then a guy named Stacy Collins, who's currently our linebacker coach here at Boise State, he was the head coach. He left and Coach Tinker took over as the head coach and then promoted me. So I was our offensive coordinator my last 2 seasons at South Dakota Mines. And then I got the opportunity to go to Utah State. So I actually did a year at Utah State in 2018. And I went there to be with Coach Collins, who originally hired me away from Eastern. And I helped him with linebacker. So I was on defense there. And that was a tremendous opportunity because I learned a ton about defense. And as an offensive coach, I really needed that knowledge, right? I needed to get exposed to the other side of the ball. And I was really lucky while I was there because we had a quarterback named Jordan Love. And I got to watch a guy do it at the highest level. We had a really, really good season because of Jordan and a bunch of good players. And then at the end of that season, I got asked by the offensive coordinator, a guy named David Yost, who's a big-time mentor of mine. I got asked to go and be his assistant quarterback coach at Texas Tech. So I decided to go down to Lubbock, and I spent 1 season, 2019, down in Lubbock, Texas, with head coach Matt Wells and then working directly with Coach Yost. And then after that 1 season, I got the opportunity to go to Montana State and be the offensive coordinator in 2020. So I went out to Montana State, and about 3 weeks after being there, we had that thing called COVID that happened. And so we didn't play football that year at Montana State. And so we did kind of like 2 different versions of spring ball that year while I was there as the offensive coordinator. And then when our head coach, Coach Choate, who's the head coach at Nevada, when he left to go to Texas at the time, I really wanted to stay because we had moved a lot at that point, as you just heard, like we were 4 schools in 4 years. And so I ended up getting the opportunity to stay on as the receiver coach and special teams coordinator and fell in love with Bozeman, Montana, and fell in love with Montana State and the players there. And my wife and I were really trying to start a family, and it was just a great place to try to do that. And so we did. We spent 5 seasons. We spent 5 years at Montana State and had a tremendous run there. We're lucky enough to make a couple of national championship appearances. We never won any of them when I was there. They finished the job this year, which was awesome to watch.
Yeah. I bet that was
and I took a
amazing,
lot of
maybe.
pride in that. Yeah, it took a lot of pride in that because I helped recruit a lot of guys that are there and developed relationships with a lot of guys that were there. So I know how important that was to the players. I know how important that was to the administration there. And certainly how important it was to Coach Vegan and the staff members there that I spent time with. That was a big time hurdle to get over. So I'm super proud of them. But after last season, I had the opportunity to come here to Boise State, which has been a spot that I have always kind of had penciled. Like, hey, if you ever have the opportunity to get to Boise State, that's a spot I would like to try to get to for a number of reasons. And one of those is it's my home state. It's a tremendous university and spot to live. But then I also had several guys on staff here that I had worked with previously. There were 4 guys on staff here that I had worked with already. And so there was a level of comfort in coming here. And then, the opportunity to come here and work for Coach Danielson, I didn't realize at the time, but was one of the best decisions of my life. And he's, in 1 year, has impacted my life more than he'll ever know. And is just a tremendous leader, tremendous person to this program, to the coaches, to the kids, to really everybody that he touches. I'm just really, really lucky to be here at Boise State, and I'm really looking forward to this next season. So have a lot of great players coming back, but yeah, have had the opportunity to live a lot of different places
Nice.
and be around a lot of great coaches. And I would say for a 15-year coaching career, those are some pretty good stops. So
Yeah. Yeah, and that just builds your resume, and then and everybody that you get to impact, and I think that that's the joy of coaching. And for me, being able to coach and have coached in the past, it's seeing these kids grow up to be men, and then I've coached women to men and women to go off to be fathers, be wives, you know, and that's what I'm proud of. You know, y- if a kid goes on and becomes successful in a pro sport, which I've been fortunate enough to have, he's playing right now in Chicago, but you know, all that's great, but it's all of them, and just seeing them grow up and then see them come back and say, "Coach, hey, how you doing?" and stuff, it means a lot, and being able to have that kind of impact, not just on the field, but the influence and impact that you can have on off the field. It's truly it's a special calling to be getting able to coach. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about the craziness that comes with your job. It's the NIL. So let's talk about recruiting, retention, roster reality, stuff like that, especially recruiting in the recruiting field and especially how that's changed. Let's talk first. When you first started coaching, NIL wasn't really a thing. And now obviously it's the conversation that goes on all the time. I mean, you're seeing, players that you think, oh wow, this is a great guy. And then next thing you know, they're moving on to some other school for various reasons. How has that changed? How has the NIL kind of changed how you go about recruiting?
yeah, I think NIL has definitely changed the landscape of it. I think, the programs that I've been around with NIL, a huge part of the push there has been more player retention than it has been anything else. I've been lucky to be at some good programs where it was like, man, we got to just try to find a way to keep our good players. So I think it starts there. It starts with trying to create an environment where it's hard for kids to leave, but you also have to be able to provide something because they're going to have to turn down something, financially to be able to stay with you. So I think when you're recruiting, I think that's all a part of it. I think it starts with the head football coach. He kind of sets the standard with how he wants that to look. And it's your job as an assistant coach to kind of follow suit, so when you're out on the road or you're interacting with people, if the first conversations are, in regards to money and NIL, it's, for the programs I've been a part of, it's probably not going to be a good fit. Like you still have to try to find those cultural pieces, those boxes that you need to check to make sure that they're going to be a good fit in your program. And that, in the case that I'm in at a Boise State, that we're not a stepping stone for anyone. You want this to be a place that a young man comes and finds to be his new home, and he wants to stay and create his legacy here, and we have a lot to offer at a place like this, and we had a lot to offer at a place like Montana State. And I bring those two schools up because those are the two schools I've worked at when we've had NIL. It's definitely changed from a recruiting standpoint as far as the recruiting calendars and how early you get recruited. At bigger schools, let's use Boise State as an example, like we're identifying those prospects pretty early in their high school career, and so those decisions are being made. It's not to say that you can't take somebody based off of senior tape. That happens, but for the most part, official visits are happening before the senior year takes place now. And so a lot of those happen out, for what people aren't familiar with, those happen in the summertime now, at bigger schools. So, for instance, I'm getting ready to go on the road the next couple weeks, and a lot of that will be, you're talking to juniors about setting up their official visit in January, and then you'll get a chance to evaluate them in the spring a little bit more and kind of fluctuate that official visit schedule. And then you're trying to get them committed, which is a lot different than being signed. So committed just is you're trying to get them in the boat, and then you're trying to keep them in the boat, but none of that can happen officially until December. And so they can't sign until December. And then the goal for most kids nowadays is to graduate early so they actually don't go to the second semester of their senior year. Most of the guys that we just signed in December from this previous class just reported to campus about a week ago and are working out with our team now and getting ready so that they can get the extra 6 months and do spring ball with us, which is huge for their development. So everything's just been pushed up, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, in order to get noticed and get recruited, and you have to be able to put yourself in front of people, and that unfortunately means probably getting to a camp or getting to a showcase. Those can be expensive. The travel can be rigorous for that. It's not always easy, but trying to put yourself in front of coaches is really important. Communicating with them, letting them know. And then I've always thought the analogy that's probably the best thing that I've ever heard is just like kind of the three stages of it. And to me, the three stages are: you have your dream school where you want to play, and you need to make sure that they know who you are and try to get recruited by them, but don't be disappointed if you don't. You have something that's a little more realistic, like, hey, I think I can get recruited by these schools and I can play at that level, and that's probably where I fit into the landscape. If I just remove my personal feelings from it, that's probably where I fit into the picture. And then the third stage is not closing the door on anyone in case something happens. And that means, if a smaller school, making sure that you've treated them right, because you never know if something's going to happen and all of a sudden you're left, with nothing, that you've approached it right, and they would love to have you come and play at their spot. And then with the way that the transfer portal is now, and I never encourage this, but like, all of your dreams and goals are still on the table, because if you did have a dream school and your dream was to go play at that school, sometimes that's through another avenue now. It's not getting recruited as an 18-year-old. It might be getting recruited from the junior college level, or it might be getting recruited from another smaller school, or another school that you've outgrown, and someone's decided that your talent is what they want. And then you'll have that decision to be able to make. And so the transfer portal isn't always a bad thing. There are things that are very positive and set up to help both coaches and players with it. It's just, the problem is the majority of the situations are, you see or that you read about are people abusing it on both sides. And I don't know, how you'll ever, that's for somebody else to decide. But for coaches, you're just trying to manage that the best that you can and stick to the morals and ethics of the program and the head coach that you're working for. And then, trying to educate people the best that you can on how the recruiting process is going to work. And that starts with timeline, and then it starts with approach too, and just what your approach is, and putting yourself in a position where you can be recruited, because it's hard to be a high school kid and get recruited right now, especially to the place that you want to go, right? Those are kind of the 1%ers out there right now. Everybody else, you got to be fluid, and you got to be willing to adapt and take into account a lot of things. And I would just always say, like, hopefully you're going to a school that you really enjoy the school, because if things change on you from a coaching perspective, I should say when they change, because it will change, hopefully you're happy there and you have friends there, like I did when I was in college and I was a freshman and we had a coaching change. Like, I loved the players that were there so much, and where I was going to school, that like I didn't want to leave. So that's a quick and dirty answer with a lot of in betweens on all of that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of moving pieces
Right.
right now, and it's not easy. It's not easy for anyone, and it's not a black and white answer. There's a lot of gray in all of it, and everybody's circumstances are different. But what you did hit the head on is, it is a lot different than when I was growing up and going through it. So I'm learning like everybody else is day to day, especially as these rules change.
Yeah. And you kind of touched a little bit about when you get this player and you get him in, and whether it comes from the portal or it's somebody that you recruit out of high school, you got to balance development. You got to there has to be some loyalty, and then you got to create opportunity for them, right? Is that kind of like a fair assessment? So how do you balance the development? How do you keep them saying that, hey, we need you at this school to, and then how do you create opportunity at the same time? You did touch a little bit about how redshirting has changed, and I think that helps a little bit, where you're able to have, before it's like, sorry, dude, I can't play today. I can't give you game time because I'll burn your red shirt. But now you can have them play a few games. You can get them in there to see how things go, to see how they react on the field. How do you manage that kind of stuff with balancing development, keeping them loyal to want to stay to be a Bronco, and create opportunity for them?
Yeah, no, that's great point. Great question. It's tricky. I think it starts with making sure you're bringing the right guys into your program. I think we all kind of know the guys that would be fringe guys anyway when it comes to some of those things. We've either played with them or coached them through the years. So I think having a great feel in the recruiting process is first and foremost. Make sure you're bringing the right guys to Boise State, to have the right priorities and that want to be about what we're about. I think the next part of it is exactly that, finding the fit for them. And that needs to be pretty early. Like, hey, these are the things that we think that they can provide. And then having a great game plan going into a season on where you see that kind of playing out for them so you can articulate that and communicate that. I think everybody just wants people to be upfront and honest and transparent with them. I think there's a lot of investment that goes into building relationships so that you can be transparent. You can feel like you can tell them the truth about what the situation is here. I think it's pretty well known that every recruiting cycle you're trying to improve your roster. So, a kid can't take offense to that, but certainly the reality is like the best players need to play. In our line of work, there's not a lot of room for error. And when you don't win, usually you get replaced. And so that's been one thing you just, through the years constantly communicated like, hey, I want to win as bad as you guys want to win. Believe me. There is a professional component to all this where you got to remove your personal feelings and make sure that the professional part of you knows like these are the guys that are further along right now. And those are the guys that are going to ultimately help us win. Obviously, you have restrictions in the number of guys that you can travel with, especially for conference games. So that factors into your decision making at the beginning of years and at the beginning of the year, and hopefully you can communicate that. But then it also comes from a head coach that is super organized and articulate with that stuff. And I think Coach Danielson does a great job of kind of articulating what he wants that to look like, especially if we have questions about it, or we can say, hey, we're looking to try to utilize this player. We'd like to preserve redshirt. I think we all know that. And that's for their benefit as much as it is for ours. But we do have the chance to play them in a certain number of games, but we also feel like that skill set helps us win the game. Or, hey, we're going into a game that we think, maybe we're going to be able to get them into the game, so let's plan on playing them, and then you do that. And there is some strategy in that. And I think to your question, which is a great question, that's everything right now. Like player retention is based off of experience, and we provide a great experience here. The Bronco Nation sells out Albertson Stadium every single Saturday that we have a home game, and this is a great place to play with passionate fan base where you don't share the state with any professional sports. And you having worked in the state, and shoot, when I was growing up in the state, like if you played for Boise State, that was a big deal. Like you were like a pro. And so our guys get that level of experience here. And I think it's one of the reasons why we're able to retain the majority of our roster. You lose some guys here or there, but guys that you want to keep, you're able to keep those guys because of the type of experience that you create on the daily basis here. And it's a day-to-day thing. You can't ever let up. It's a year-round 365 type of an effort this day and age in college football in every program.
So let's talk about this one whole thing real quick, and then we'll move on to one other segment, and then we'll start wrapping things up. If you could speak directly, because I'm assuming that you're going to be talking to, I mean, I'm sure you could talk to other players, but I'm sure, like, 'cause obviously your position is quarterbacks. If you could speak directly to a 14 through 17-year-old player right now who's a quarterback or wants to be successful, what would you tell them to focus on?
Hmm. In regards to their development, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just if I got a kid, he wants to play at Boise State. That's his dream. He wants to be there.
Okay.
For him to get to that point, what is a couple of things he should be focusing on so he has an opportunity to do that?
Yeah, I think there's the physical component to it. I think in order to be able to play at this level, where the standard here at Boise State is that we're competing for championships every single year, and you're doing that as a top 25 team, top 15, top 10 team, hopefully. Like, I think the expectations are really high from a physical standpoint. So, for guys that are trying to develop in that way, um, being able to develop as a passer and we call it FBI here, but your football intelligence, that part of it becomes really important. So the guys that are studying football and that are becoming really, really good mechanically, I think those things are really important to get noticed and get on the map. I think you got to be able to put yourself in front of coaches. You got to be able to throw in front of coaches. I mean, game tape is going to be really important. I think when we look at a lot of different matrix and different things, but, we do look at accuracy in high school, whether you're playing at Genesee High School or you're playing at Rocky Mountain High School. You're playing at a 1A or you're playing at a 6A high school. Are you a guy that can make plays and find complete, and how great are you off script? And do you have the physical makeup? Do you have the size and the measurables and the tools to be able to make that?
So yeah, you got done talking about looking at quarterbacks. You talked about everything you're kind of looking for and what they can be working on, and obviously there's a lot of stuff there. But I think, like you said, to be at that level, if you want to be that 1% that gets in there, especially at a quarterback position, because it's that's the job. I mean, out of all the positions, that's the one that's you got to be the most. I mean, you got to be really competent at everything, but you do. But football, as a quarterback, there's so much on your plate. So being able to manage all that, especially with your football IQ and everything else that goes with that. So yeah, that's some great stuff. Thanks for sharing that with us. One more segment, and then we'll get into we'll finish things up here in a second here. I want to talk about a little bit about uh, going through losing streaks and stuff like that as a coach in general. I think sometimes we talk about the successes and stuff like that. As a coach myself, I've been a part of teams that have won. I've been a part of teams that lose. Do you approach stuff like this? How do you keep players engaged when results aren't matching up with expectations? The role as a coach, what is the role of a coach to help guide players through that, to be so you're not having people like, dude, I'm done. When either you got a losing streak going on during the season, or your season in general just was not what you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's super tricky. I think, a big part of it starts before the losing ever really happens. It's, what is your foundation? And I think, starting with the head coach and kind of the pillars of your program, you have to have a solid foundation. And those are the things that have to be kind of hammered home on a daily basis. I know here at Boise State, we do a lot of different things to be able to build, that culture and be able to have that foundation that we can lean on, because it's really for the tough times. It's not really when everything's going good. It's for when you're challenged and maybe things aren't going the way that you want them to go. I think in any of the great programs that I've been a part of, when maybe we haven't won the games we've needed to win, or we're losing more than we'd like to, certainly the players in the locker room have a huge impact on that. Your player leadership, your kind of your horizontal leadership, player to player, what is your locker room temperature really? And I think that some of the teams that I've been on that have had great leaders, at certain positions, hopefully at the quarterback position, they're the ones that help kind of steer you in the right direction. And there are no moral victories in our game, but certainly you can have seasons where that you're building something and maybe you're just not getting the results on the scoreboard. And I used to work for a guy who used to talk a lot about, first it starts with losing big, and then it slowly works its way into losing small, and then eventually losing small becomes winning small. And the only way that happens is to be able to get into games, find your way into the fourth quarter, and hopefully manage coming out on top of those, because once you kind of break through on a game or two, that's what will ultimately end up changing the tide in your favor. And I think those seasons where you're struggling, have to be able to find a way to reset the following week, knowing that if you could just find a way to win that next one, or put yourself into a game plan situation where hey, maybe we're outmatched right now, but if we can find a way to keep ourselves in it and have the opportunity to win the game, you never know. I've been really, really lucky. The last, several programs I've been a part of have been very, very successful. And so haven't had a ton of long losing streaks, but, I had one as a player when I was a freshman in college where we really didn't win very many games at all. We only won the one game. But then I've had a lot of seasons that were kind of in that 500 range, and those involved some losing streaks that, I would say that's really what got us over the hump, was like, how can we just get the next one? And getting everybody focused on what's next and not what's already happened. And I think some of the greatest leaders and people that I've worked for are masters of that. It's just kind of like, hey, what's next? And that involves everybody, not just who's building the program up, but the guys that are maybe even on their last year, from a college standpoint that don't have any time left. It's like there's still a lot to be accomplished here. And there's a legacy that's going to be left, and how you want that to look certainly matters to most of us. Most of us care about what people think enough to have a little bit of pride. And I think the best guys I've ever been around, especially head coaches, know exactly how to tap into that. They know exactly what buttons to push to be able to bring the most out of people, even in their toughest hour.
So uh, I think that sometimes the greatest lessons can happen during better more during adversity than when you're winning. Um, so how do you teach that to players? How do you teach that to these young men who some of these guys they're coming from colleges or coming from high schools that were very successful, and they might be experiencing something like that for the first time, or it's something they're not used to. How do you teach them to make this a learning experience to understand that adversity is their greatest teacher? How do you um, make them understand the importance of that?
Yeah, I think it's the accountability part of what we're in. I think there's an accountability phase. As a coach, you have to take that first and foremost. I think you have to recognize, you have to be willing to raise your hand and say, "Hey, we made a bad call here. We coached a bad technique. We thought it was going to be this, it was actually that." There are moments throughout the course of a game, even when you win, that and you realize you've been out coached or you've been out schemed on something. And we're all very competitive. That's why we're in it. But then that has to be able to trickle down through, be able to feel like you can articulate and communicate with the players, that there's an accountability part to maybe the execution of what we were trying to do not being at a high level, or us losing in a one-on-one situation. Um, and they have to be willing to take that and also raise their hand and say, okay, that's why that's what's holding us back. Because I think the reality is, like, we're all just trying to chase our true potential, right? And I think as coaches and players, when we take a step back, the realities are we know that we're going to fall short of that, but it doesn't keep us from trying to improve on a daily basis, and ultimately, hopefully, get closer and closer to our fullest potential. And usually it's that breakthrough. I mean, you see it every single season. I'm sure you've seen it as a coach. Like, the guy that was supposedly nothing, that didn't do a lot for the team the year before, just all of a sudden is a great player the next year. Well, that's not true. Like, he showed signs and he developed. And what made him make that jump? And typically it's because it's a guy who is all about all the right things, right? It's not typically by accident. It's somebody that committed to the plan, whether it was the strength conditioning, the nutrition, the culture of the program, the scheme, the position fundamentals, like, the extra stuff that he needs to do to be able to continue to climb. Like, that player is wired a particular way. We talk about your wiring a lot here at Boise State. As a player, we want guys that are wired a particular way. And it's because we know that those guys will continue to grow, and ultimately, like, who they are right now will not be who they are tomorrow, will not be who they are next season. And hopefully you're continuing to get a better version of those individuals as we go through. And that's ultimately what's going to help you push through in times of hardship. And it's just that accountability piece to be able to ultimately raise your hand and say, "Man, that one's on me, and I'm going to make sure I'm going to do everything that I can so that it doesn't happen again." That we don't repeat history that way.
These are quick hits, so you ready? Here we
I'm
go.
ready.
All right. What is your favorite part about coaching quarterbacks?
My favorite part of coaching quarterbacks? Is that what you asked?
Yes.
My favorite part. I think that you're the trigger man. You make everything go. That it's on you, good or bad. It's on you. I love that part of it. I love it being that we're the one to make that decision.
Nice. Best advice you've ever received as a coach?
Don't don't keep score in coaching. Don't keep score. Like, your coaching path and my coaching path are not going to be the same. Don't be envious and jealous of somebody who maybe has a job that you think you should have that job, because tomorrow it can change in a heartbeat. And that's probably the greatest advice I've ever had, is like, don't try to keep a scoreboard. You just need to worry about what you got going on and be the best coach you can be. And the old saying, be where your feet are. Um, there's so much truth to that, and it's really hard to overcome that in our profession. because it's easy to get jealous and think that you deserve something that maybe you don't have.
I love that one. One thing you wish parents understood about college football.
One thing that I wish the rules of football? No, one thing that I wish parents understood about college football, I think it would be great if people continued to understand the recruiting part of football, because I think that would only help the game continue to progress forward. I think it would hopefully clear things up, but that's really hard because it's ever changing. But yeah, just hopefully parents can kind of stay in the know on timelines and recruiting, because it's really hard right now, but it doesn't make a lot of sense, but everything's just moved up, and it's really, really hard to get recruited. So if they understood recruiting, they would realize how competitive it is and how hard it is, and be more realistic about it. And I think that would help kids kind of get to where they want to go.
Okay. I like it. Last one. What legacy do you hope players remember from their time being coached by you? What legacy do you want to leave for those players that you've been around?
Yeah. That's why, that like this whole thing is about the players to me. That's been what's kept me in it, is the relationships with the players. I really, really value those. Those are guys, I've got guys now that, I've coached for 15 years, and there's a lot of players along the way. I think I want the legacy for me to just be that I was somebody that was there for them, that cared about them, that told them the truth, and ultimately helped them become the father, the husband that they are today. I know that sounds a little cliche, but like, I know that it's shaped me. They've helped shape me as a coach, as a husband, as a father. And, the legacy is just like, I hope that they feel like they can always pick up the phone and call me, and that I'll be there for them, and I'll help them through whatever they need help with. And I know that some of them have taken me up on that. And that's the most rewarding part of doing all of this. I know you said it was rapid fire. I just, that particular question is the whole purpose behind
No,
what
you're
I'm
fine.
doing it for. And I love the players. That's what's made it hard to leave a lot of the places I've been. But probably the most rewarding part is when you do leave a place, and the amount of phone calls and text messages that you get from the guys, knowing that you've impacted them in a positive way. And like I said, I see guys, I saw a former player of mine from 15 years ago the other day, and he's only a year younger than me. I ended up being his coach my first year, and he still remembers everything from that year. And that to me is the most rewarding part, is like you create a lifelong memory. And that's what this is all about. This is about creating memories and creating positive experiences that you take with you and help shape you. And so hopefully my legacy is that it's somebody that cared, and somebody that loved on them. And, I think even the guys that probably didn't feel it in the moment, I think they know it now, deep down, later on, now that they've had to go through it, either as a husband, a father, as a coach.
Love that answer, man. Yeah. Take as much time on those answers. I love it. All right. This is my last segment. I do it all the time. It's a traditional thing I do. I do
Okay.
unusual sports mascots. So what I do is I find high school
Okay.
mascots from around the area, from around the country, that are just unusual. Around your area, we talked about Orofino. We've talked about the Maniacs. We've talked about the Bend
Okay.
Lava Bears. We talked about the Yuma Criminals. So I had one here not too long ago. I actually did with Coach Christian there at Eastern Oregon. We talked about the Leopards at this deaf and blind school in state school in Arkansas, and they're the Deaf Leopards.
Okay.
In fact, the musical group actually stopped by and came by and took pictures and stuff with the school. That's the Def Leopards. So very unique.
Okay.
I'll always go around. So we're going to Maine. We're going to Westbrook, Maine, and this place got its name from during the British Crown, when the colonies were there, dealing with the identifying marks for trees to be cut to be built as masses over in England. So they harvested trees in Maine, shipped them over. So they would mark them. And we are going to be talking about the way what the design it was got their name. They are the Blue Blaze, the Blue Blazes of Westbrook High School. So a little snapshot of the school. It's about 704 students there in their 9th, 12th grade. It looks like the school was established 1873, so it's been around a long time. Football, historically, they won their first state title. It looks like in Let's see here. The first state title with a 40-20 championship win this year. So they got their first state title actually this year. Basketball legacy at their school. It looks like they're looks like the Basketball Hall of Fame. It looks like the girls team had multiple championships runs during the 80s. Um, cool facts. Music Pride. They have award-winning performance. They get to travel to like Disneyland and stuff like that. So
Okay.
yeah, looking at the area itself, the population around 21,000 people. It's kind of basically a suburb of the Portland area. It looks like it blends in. It looks like they got a lot of life science jobs. It looks like there's a huge laboratory headquarters in Westbrook in that area. Cost of living 112% above average. Median household income is around 85,000. It looks like home ownership, your homes are going to be around 340. That's was low average in the 2019. Now, according to Zillow, home prices are around 434,000. So, yeah, gotta love the economy. So that's our mascot of the week. It is the Blue Blaze of Westbrook. Hey, man,
How about that?
Coach Udy, love having you on here, man. I appreciate it. You got a busy schedule coming up. I appreciate everything that you do. I can tell you right now, man, that you are a great person, and I hope people realize that, and I hope you realize the impact you've had on everybody. And so, good luck this season. Good luck to you and the coaches this year. I will try to get myself down to Boise State. I haven't got to see a Boise State game here in a few years, so I'll try to get down there. I do get to make a trip down there, though, this summer to go down on the Blue. Get to go watch the Bananas ball going on. So I got to check that out. So,
Sweet.
anyways,
Yeah.
I appreciate it. So I appreciate you, man, and you take care of yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.